The inversion nobody explains.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The Quran was not revealed in the order you read it. You know this. What you do not know, what almost no one tells you at the beginning, is that the order it was arranged in follows a logic so precise, so structurally deliberate that scholars who spent decades mapping it describe the experience the same way. Like discovering a building you have lived in your entire life has a blueprint you never saw. Not a loose collection, not a convenient assembly, a mirror. The longest surahs come first, the shortest come last. The early revelations, urgent, cosmic, existential, sit at the end of the book. The later revelations, legal, communal, detailed, sit at the beginning. By every surface measure, the Quran is assembled backwards. And here is what no one tells you at the beginning. That inversion is not an accident, it is the architecture. And once you see what it is doing to the text, to the reader, to the experience of a human life moving through faith, you will not be able to read it the same way. Let's establish what you already know, because it matters. The Quran was revealed over approximately 23 years. The first revelations came in Makkah, roughly 610 CE onward. These early surahs are short, rhythmically intense, cosmologically vast. They speak of resurrection, of the soul's accountability, of God's absolute singularity. They are concerned with what existence is. The later revelations came after the Hijrah to Medina, 622 CE onward. These surahs are long, often legislative, socially detailed. They establish prayer times, inheritance law, rules of warfare and marriage and community. They are concerned with how to live. This is the distinction every student of Islamic sciences learns in the first year. Makkan, short, cosmic, early. Medinan, long, legal, later. What they are almost never shown is what happens when you map the arrangement of the compiled Quran against this chronology. The Quran opens with Al-Baqarah, 286 verses. Medinan, legal, late revelation. It closes with Al-Ikhlas, Al-Falaq, Al-Nas, 4 verses, 5 verses, 6 verses. Makkan, cosmic, early revelation. You are reading, in terms of revelation history, from the end of the prophetic mission toward its beginning. Now, here is the reframe that changes everything. Scholars like Mustansir Mir, in his 1986 work, Coherence in the Quran, and Neal Robinson, in Discovering the Quran, independently arrived at the same structural observation. The Quran's arrangement is not random and it is not purely chronological. It is thematic and chiastic, meaning it operates like a mirror structure, where elements in the first half of the book correspond to elements in the second half, and the center holds the hinge. The building has a blueprint, and the blueprint is not what you were looking at. Let's move through the evidence carefully, because this is where precision matters. The Quran contains 114 surahs. Scholars of Tartib, the science of surah arrangement, have noted that the Mushaf, the compiled text, divides into recognizable structural units. The first 2 surahs, Al-Fatiha and Al-Baqarah, function as an opening pair. The final 3 surahs, Al-Ikhlas, Al-Falaq, and An-Nas, function as a closing triad. These are almost universally acknowledged, even in traditional scholarship. But go deeper. Surah Al-Kahf, the cave, number 18, sits by scholarly calculation near the structural center of the Quran when measured by verse count. The Quran contains 6,236 verses. The midpoint falls within the passage of Al-Kahf. This has been noted by scholars including the Egyptian researcher Abdallah ibn Salih al-Zarani, and while the precise verse of the midpoint is subject to methodological debate depending on which counting system you use, the convergence around Al-Kahf is documented across multiple independent calculations. This matters because Al-Kahf, the cave, is a surah about concealment and revelation, about a group of young men who retreat from a corrupt world, sleep for 309 years, and return to find time has moved without them. It is, thematically, a surah about the interior, the hidden space where faith survives pressure. It sits at the interior of the book. And then something happened when researchers began mapping the thematic pairs across this central axis. Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah 2, long, Medinan, opens with the description of believers, hypocrites, and disbelievers, finds its thematic mirror in the final Makkan surahs near the end, which return to the same tripartite human division in compressed, urgent form. Surah Al-Imran, Surah 3, which addresses the people of the book and the nature of revelation itself, finds its echo in the short Makkan surahs near the end that return to the question of what it means to receive divine speech. Layer after layer, scholars working in the tradition of Nazm, Quranic coherence theory, developed rigorously by the 10th century scholar Al-Farahi and carried forward by Amin Ahsan Islahi in his monumental 9-volume Tadabbur-e-Quran, found that the surahs do not stand alone. They are grouped, they pair, they respond to each other across the chiastic axis. Islahi identified what he called surah pairs and groups, adjacent surahs sharing thematic, linguistic, and structural DNA, and argued that the entire 114 surah corpus is organized into 7 major thematic clusters, each with a distinctive opening and closing movement. This is not numerology. This is documented literary analysis carried out by scholars trained in classical Arabic, hadith sciences, and Quranic grammar. Acknowledge the controversy because intellectual honesty demands it. Not all classical scholars accepted the chiastic reading. Some traditionalists argue the arrangement was divinely dictated without requiring human-readable structural logic. Others argue the thematic pairs are real, but the chiastic framework is one valid reading among several. The debate is alive, but the patterns themselves, the pairing, the mirroring, the thematic correspondence, these are not invented, they are observed. But here is what the numbers alone cannot tell you. Why backwards? If the Quran had been arranged chronologically, if you opened with the first words revealed in the cave of Hira and closed with the final verses of the Medinan period, you would read a history, a biography of a revelation, a linear unfolding. Instead, you open with law, with community, with the fully formed vision of what human society under divine guidance looks like. And you move as you read toward the raw existential core, toward the questions underneath the law, toward the night, the soul, the singular nature of God. You begin with the answer and you move toward the question. Consider what this does to the reader. A new Muslim opening the Quran for the first time encounters Al-Baqarah, an enormous, complex surah of legal detail, narrative reference, communal instruction. It is overwhelming. It is by design a world to enter rather than a system to understand immediately. But the long-term reader, the one who has recited, memorized, lived with the text across years, eventually arrives at the short, burning cosmic surahs at the end and finds that they are the beginning, that the existential urgency of the early Makkan revelation, read, your Lord is the most generous, is waiting at the back of the book like a door that opens inward. There is a surah for the night you cannot sleep, wondering if any of this is real. There is a surah for the morning when certainty returns without explanation. There is a surah, just 4 verses, that contains, according to scholars including Imam al-Ghazali, the entire theological core of Islam, compressed to its irreducible minimum. These surahs are at the end of the book, which means the Quran, read linearly, moves you from civilization towards soul, from the architecture of a just society toward the single, undivided point from which all of it emerges. Al-Ikhlas, Surah 112, 4 verses. Say, He is Allah, the One, Allah, the eternal refuge. He neither begets nor is born, and there is nothing comparable to Him. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said this surah equals 1/3 of the Quran. Scholars have debated the precise meaning of that statement for 1400 years, but structurally, its placement at the near end of the Mus'haf after 114 surahs of expanding, elaborating, contextualizing divine speech, it functions as a compression, a return to the seed after the full tree has been shown. This is not coincidence. This is architecture serving a purpose no human editorial committee would have designed, because no human editorial committee thinks across 23 years of revelation and 114 surahs simultaneously.
So, what are we looking at when we look at this inversion? We're looking at a text that refuses to be read only one way. Read it front to back. You move from law to mystery, from the social to the cosmic, from community to the singular soul standing before God. Read it in revealed order. You move from existential crisis, what is this? What am I receiving? Toward the construction of a civilization, a legal framework, a lived community. Both readings are real. Both are happening simultaneously in the same 114 surahs. Mustansir Mir wrote that the Quran's coherence is neither the coherence of a legal code nor the coherence of a narrative, but something for which literary criticism has not yet developed adequate vocabulary. That sentence has stayed with scholars for decades because it is precise and honest. We have the tools to observe the patterns. We do not yet have complete tools to explain why those patterns produce the effect they produce. The effect that readers across 14 centuries, in dozens of languages, from vastly different cultural contexts, describe in remarkably similar terms. Something is happening in the encounter with this text that exceeds the sum of its documented structural features. A secular literary scholar looks at the chiastic structure and sees sophisticated compositional architecture, evidence of a unified authorial intelligence organizing a complex corpus. A believer looks at the same 114 surahs and sees something that could not have been consciously planned by a man who could not read, receiving verses across 23 years in varying circumstances, in a culture with no tradition of this kind of textual architecture. Both are looking at the same 114 surahs. Both are being changed by what they find there.
Here is what remains unexplained. The chiastic structure, if it is real and complete, requires that its designer held the entire 114 surah corpus in view simultaneously, knowing the first surah and the last, knowing the center, knowing what would mirror what before or during or across the entire process of revelation. No traditional account of the Quran's compilation attributes this kind of simultaneous architectural vision to any human compiler. The arrangement is traditionally understood as divinely instructed, communicated through the prophet across his lifetime. Which means either the structure is a product of human pattern recognition, finding shapes in complexity, or it is something that was always there, waiting to be seen. Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that both are true, that the Quran was designed to be inexhaustible, that every generation of readers, with new tools, new frameworks, new questions, would find the structure responding to those questions as if it had been waiting. A text that is always somehow one layer deeper than the last reading reached. Perhaps that is precisely the point.